Okay, so significance level. So we're always going to be in significance. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to look for the p-value and compare it with the alpha level. Okay, so obviously we want the small p-value. Okay, so that's kind of another way to think about these things. All right. So we're going to continue on, and in the second part, we're going to talk about type 1 and type 2 errors. So they're kind of, so when we're doing these testings, there are two types of errors that can happen, right? And if you look at the bottom of page 560, you have here, and you have the whole is true, you have the high is true, okay, and then you have rejecting the whole, and you are failed to rejecting the whole. Okay, so if the whole is true, you should fail to reject, right? You should fail to reject the whole. Okay, so this is correct or good, right? This is a good thing. Okay, if the high is true, you should reject the whole. So this here is correct. Okay, now if the whole is true and you reject the whole, that's obviously an error, right? That's something wrong. You did it wrong, right? Or the data showed up wrong, or something happened, right? So this is an error, okay? This error here we call a type 1 error. It's Roman numeral. Okay, and the high is true. If the high is true, you're supposed to fail to, well, if the high is true, okay, you cannot fail to reject the whole, right? If the high is true, you should reject the whole, which is correct. But if you did not, then you would have a type 2 error, okay? All right? So these are the two different types of errors that you can have. There's a type 1 error, a type 2 error, okay? So let's go ahead and read the green box there. Type 1 error occurs, this is the type 1 error right here, type 1 error occurs if a test rejects the whole when the whole is true. So when the whole is true and you reject it, that's a type 1 error, okay? That is, the test finds convincing evidence that the high is true when it really isn't, okay? All right, the type 2 error occurs if a test fails to reject the whole, you fail to reject the whole, okay, when the high is true, right? So right there, that's the error. That is, the test does not find convincing evidence that the high is true when it really is. Okay? All right. So that's what the difference between the type 1 and type 2 error is. Okay? Let's go ahead and do an example. If you do an example, it's kind of should become a little more, or hopefully clearer of what we're talking about. Okay? So let's look at the perfect potatoes there. The potato shipment producer and its main supplier agree that each shipment of potatoes must meet certain quality standards. If the producer determines that more than 8% of the potatoes in the shipment have blemishes, okay, the truck will be sent away to get another load of potatoes from the supplier, but they will reject that truck. Okay, they will reject that shipment of that truck of that shipment, right? Okay. Otherwise, the entire truckload will be used to make the potato chips. To make a decision, a supervisor will inspect a random sample of 500 potatoes from the shipment. The producer will perform a test at the significance level of 5%. and the whole being P is equal to 0.08, the ha being P is greater than 0.08, okay? Where P is the true proportion of the potatoes with blemishes on a given truckload. Okay, describe a type 1 and type 2 error in this setting. Okay, so setting we have whole where P is greater than P is equal to 0.8, and you have 0.08, right? 0.08. The probability of the blemishes is 0.08. The ha alternative being that P is greater than 0.08. P is greater than 0.08. Okay. So a type 1 error is when this is true. Okay, this is true, but I reject that. I reject that, which means that what? That means that I actually have less than, or I have equal to 8%. I have no greater than 8% blemishes there. Okay, P is equal to, I have 8% blemishes, but I go ahead and reject it. Okay, so what's happening here? I am turning away a perfectly usable truckload of potatoes, right? Okay, so that's what happening in that error, right? So type 2 error is when the ha is true, I'm going to get a grade. So the ha is true, which means that I have more than 8% blemishes, but I failed to reject the whole, meaning what? I'm going to accept that truckload of potatoes and I'm going to make potato chips out of them. Okay, so what's the bad thing for that? I'm going to be making potato chips with bad potatoes, which means that my customers are not going to like the potato chips, which means that less and less people will buy my potato chips, right? Not a good thing. So would you rather have a type 1 error or a type 2 error here? Kayla.
Type 1.
You would rather have a type 1 error, right? Because in type 1 error, what happens? I just sent back a perfectly good shipment of potatoes, right? Hey, that's okay, right? At least we're not feeding our consumers bad potatoes, right? But in type 2 error, many bad things can happen by feeding bad potatoes to our customers, correct? Okay, right. So that's that. Okay, another thing you need to know here is that the probability of a type 1 error turns out to be the same as your alpha value, okay? So the larger the significance level, the larger you would have the probability of having a type 1 error, okay? All right, so the reason why that happens is that's beyond our scope, okay? We will talk about the type 2 error later on, but as of now, we're only going to worry about this. The type 1 error, okay, the probability of getting a type 1 error is the same as your significance level, okay? And that's it. We're done. We are done.